and as well to the exchange price that's available for trading on the market. In addition to the transparency, we would most of the ETF publish their holding per day, so investor or whoever wants to buy an ETF will know exactly what he's going to get an exposure to, whether it's a portfolio or a basket of stocks or basket of different asset classes. So investors will know exactly what he's going to be exposed to. It offers, again, a different or exposure to geographic region or industry or sectors. For definitely we are talking here about stocks, ETF stocks or equity ETFs. Access to different asset classes, we'll come to it later on. Diversification, which is one of the main features that ETFs offers, and cost efficient compared to other mutual funds. This is this slide basically a comparable slide. It shows you what is the difference between ETFs and others. If we take it to a normal mutual fund, it both have diversification, both charges management fees from the fund manager, yet usually ETFs are more cost efficient compared to mutual fund that is traded actively or managed actively. Index mutual fund is the same in this case, except if it's tracking an index, it will be similar to an ETF. Stocks usually traded on the market, intraday pricing, intraday trading, and commission fee basically that is charged upon buying and selling. So ETF combine all these features of these three type of securities, if we could call them. What is, let's say, comparing to a direct mutual fund, the main, let's say, things that differentiate between ETF and a mutual fund, subscription. Basically, if someone wants to subscribe to a mutual fund, he definitely needs to go to a platform, if the fund manager offers it through a platform, or go directly to the branch of the fund manager and request to subscribe in that fund. Contrary to ETF, you can buy it and sell it through the exchange, as long as the exchange working hour or your request is done during the exchange working hours. Price, usually for mutual fund is a forward price, i.e. investors does not know what are the pricing he's going to be buying the units for. For the ETF, it's on spot pricing. Operation expenses, usually ETF tend to charge lower cost due to different reasons, to the investment strategy and to the operating model itself. Transparency, due to the earlier discussed point or highlighted points. Usually ETF more transparent than other similar pooled investments. We'll take you to another slide. This slide basically talks about the type of ETF globally. These type of ETF might not be very popular, not all of them, but definitely it shows how ETF can be used and what could serve as a product. As you know, passive equity ETF, this is something we have in our local market, active equity ETFs, fixed income ETF, which we do have in our market, commodity ETF, as well we do have it in our market, style, inverse, and alternative investments, and leverage ETF. These are newly introduced to the global market, but we've seen a growth or a high growth in these as well, new styles of ETF.
Fahad, if you allow me on fixed income ETFs, think that more and more investors are becoming interested in fixed income investments to avoid or mitigate against equity market volatility, or maybe add a component of periodical distribution to their portfolios. But why would an investor decide to buy fixed income ETF unit rather than go and invest directly in the debt instrument? So if you could shed some light on the pros and cons of fixed income investing through ETFs rather than buying the security itself.
Valid question, Hamid. I think, and it's not only my own thought process, this is something we've witnessed. ETF or fixed income sukuk, for example, that Al Bilad is offering in the Saudi market, tend to have more trading compared to listed sukuk. Listed sukuk, basically secondary market, the one who trades on it are institutional clients with large big tickets. And usually the spread between them is very high compared to ETF units, which invest, yes, in the same asset class or in the same, let's say, universe, but it offers more liquidity through the vehicle of an ETF. This is one. Second one, basically for retail investor, it is more beneficial to invest in a diversified portfolio of sukuk or fixed income, or what we call it bonds, rather than investing in a single sukuk or a single bond listed in the primary and the exchange. This is something globally as well, the same trend. Usually ETF that invest in fixed income have more volume in terms of number of trade compared to the underlying fixed income. I hope this addresses your question, Hamid.
Thank you, Fahad. I mean, exactly. The thing is that fixed income investments has been difficult for a long time to retail investors specifically. Most of those securities are not listed on the exchange. They are largely issued in private placements and traded between institutional investors. However, even the listed securities are still not visible maybe for retail investors. It's quite difficult for them to trade it compared to equity. So my personal opinion is that fixed income ETFs will actually see a huge huge percentage of growth compared to other ETFs in the future. And I think that be focusing on those types of ETFs for retail investors could also actually add to the debt market itself and the ETF market as well. Thank you, Fahad.
I agree. Being said, now we've explained what are ETF types, and what is the difference between ETF and other similar securities or pooled investments like mutual funds. We will go to the global trend or growth story for ETFs. So from a global studies and based on our own assessment of the market, we've seen mainly four trends that fuel the growth of ETF. ETF usually, or new investor, became more active, i.e. they come in and come out based on macro and micro assessment rather than a single stock picking or a single security picking. They would go to a macro and micro level and they do the allocation based on a high level assessment. Second one is because it's cost efficient for small portfolios or for medium portfolios even. It might not worth it to go and select stock by stock compared to buying a diversified portfolio or even buying 3 different ETFs that offer 3 different exposures of asset classes or risk profiles for the underlying assets. The third one, which we've seen in the global, which is the transformation in the model, in the business model of investment. We've seen global trends that leads or driven by robo-advisory. Basically, robo-advisory take into account ETF more than picking a single stocks. That basically gives the investors, either a retail or an institution, mainly retail investor here, and maybe in specific the saving or who's looking for saving. Usually, whenever they go to a robo-advisory service, it get advised to invest in or do the allocation in ETFs listed in the market. Again, in the fourth point, the same point we've discussed earlier, Hamid, that sukuk or saved or fixed income favoring to trades in ETF rather than trading in the listed fixed income or non-listed sukuk or fixed income instruments. Basically, what is used for investor in their portfolio? We've seen it related to cash equalization, strategic asset allocation, risk management, and underlying assets for fund of funds. Basically, this is one point that we will be basically talking about later. Why we've seen growth for fund of funds or appetite for fund of funds to invest in ETFs and sector rotation strategies as well that ETF offers. Again, this slide shows the global ETF AUM in the first 2 graphs on the top. On the left, US market AUM growth versus the mutual fund growth. We've seen, or the US market have seen a huge growth in AUMs of ETF compared to mutual fund. We can see it's more than 10%, varies between 10 to 15% different between the growth of mutual fund AUM compared to ETF. Yes, there's still the graph on the right shows that the mutual fund AUM is much larger. It sits at 30 trillion compared to less than 10 trillion ETFs in the US market. So that shows how the trend goes, yet it is still, there is a huge potential for it to capture more market share of traditional mutual funds. On the graph on the bottom, it shows number of ETF globally and globally ETF AUM growth. So it shows that most of AUM and ETF are listed in the US market, which is very reasonable due to the being the largest market in the world. So global asset class, global ETF by asset class. Mainly the focus of ETFs globally are in the equities. Then the second one in the bond, which is the fixed income instruments, alternative than the money market funds or money market investments. That shows how the concentration in equities takes the large stake of the asset class of ETF. That totally makes sense due to what ETF can offer of different strategies for equities compared to other asset classes.
Fahad, if you allow me, I mean, it's interesting to see the money market among the ETF universe. And looking at the considerable size of money market mutual funds in the kingdom, which in most asset management firms exceed the AUMs of equity funds. The question is, does it really work? And do you think that there could be a shift from traditional mutual funds, traditional money market mutual funds to money market ETFs? Really want to hear your opinion on that.
So that very interesting question, Hamid. I think it will face a lot of challenges for money market ETF to basically to overcome the success story of money market mutual funds due to many reasons. Money market and a global market, they tends to be more very short-term instruments. It is mostly a cash equivalent, so the return is slightly above the overnight deposits in the global market. For the local market, I think it's very challenging due to basically to offer a money market ETF, you will need basically a very tight spread and high liquidity volume to offer this. And this, I think, will come in the future, but I don't think it could be something that could take a market share of the normal mutual fund and money market. And the contrary, for equities and fixed income, I do think local market will take more or will capture more market share of ETF from the normal or traditional mutual funds. Does this address your question, Hamid?
Thank you, Fahad. Yeah.
Basically, what is the expectation for the global market? This is based on BlackRock study that they expected to reach 12 trillion by end of 2023 from 9.6. Based on the historical growth, we think as well this is a very realistic figure. Again, US is the largest ETF market. It has almost 70% of the total AUM of ETF by 2020. A very interesting information that 26 of market trading average in the US is trading in ETF units. This is a very interesting. So it is 1/4 of the total trading happens on ETF unit, not on the listed other securities, which is a very huge in a market like US. So I think for local market, comparing to local market, I think there is a huge potential for Saudi market to grow the trades and AUM in local market. Being said, we will go to how ETF works, how it's operated usually globally and in the local market for investor to know what is ETF in depth. ETFs usually have a primary and secondary markets. Secondary market is the market that everyone knows, which basically the exchange market, where people do exchange, buy and sell listed securities, including ETF units. Number of units for ETF are determined based on the demand in the market. ETF, we've said earlier that it's an open-ended pooled investment. What does it mean, open-ended? Open-ended, that means number of units listed in the market is not detriment. It could be 10 units, it could be 100 million units, or even more. It is totally correlated with the demand of the market. As long as there is a demand for the ETF units in the market, primary market will issue units and list it immediately on the secondary market. That process tends to take a very few timeline, or a very short timeline. Secondary market happens, the transaction of the trading. Who trades on the secondary market are investors, money market, and brokers, or whoever, or globally they are called authorized participant. On the other side, on the primary market, the creation and redemption. Creation and redemption, it is similar to subscription and redemption. Whenever we talk about mutual fund, for ETF, it's called redemption and creation. Basically, creation of a new unit and redeeming or terminating these units. This happens at the primary market. Usually, the transaction happens after the closing of NAV. For some of the ETF, it happens during the day. Who trades on the primary market usually are the market maker of that specific ETF, and institutional investors and approved traders. Again, one important point is if the listed security or the listed ETF will be priced based on the market demand, with the support of the market maker to normalize the pricing or keep it close to the NAV, but there would be two different pricing, which is the trading price, which is the first one, and the reference price, which is the NAV, which is the net asset value per unit. That is published and available every 15 seconds on the website of the exchange and the website of the fund manager. We'll be speaking later where investor can find these information. This is a graph that simplify the secondary market versus primary market. On the right side, it is a simple buy and sell a security, a listed security. On the primary market, there would be a primary dealer, ETF manager, and a redemption and subscription process. Is more complicated, but is done within a very short time frame. Depends on the underlying security of that specific ETF. So we've covered the global market, what's the growth history, and we've covered how it works as an ETF. Now we will speak more about Saudi market ETFs. So we've noticed in the Saudi market a noticeable growth in the multi-assets. Multi-assets, from its name, basically invest in different asset classes and different securities. These multi-assets needs a solutions like ETF to fulfill their needs, basically. So it goes both ways. Like we've said earlier, if a multi-assets interest is growing, then it needs the solution which our ETF can provide to them. On the left side, we can see that on a quarter basis in 2021, we've seen overall a growth in money market, ETFs and fund of funds, which is the same as multi-assets. Fund of funds are funds that invest into different asset classes and different funds. Again, on the other side, when we talk about the global trend, what is the driver of the global trend of ETF? We've mentioned that the robo-advisory and the saving solution that provides to individuals or retail investors. Same here in Saudi market. We can anticipate that there are a growth in saving programs. There an interest for Saudi individuals to have more saving, and it is one of the objective of the financial industry of the Saudi Vision 2030. To increase the saving for Saudi individuals or the household. So being said, to be able to do saving and through a robo-advisory or through a mutual funds like multi-assets or fund of funds, then they need the solution, which are usually ETF will be the optimal solution for them to make the investments. On the second table, we've seen as well that provide a snapshot on how's the growth for private funds in the Saudi market for multi-assets compared to other asset classes. For Saudi ETF market, I'll leave the floor to my colleague Hamid to speak about this slide.
Thank you, Haytham. I just wanted to shed some light on the activity of ETFs in the Saudi exchange and the Saudi market. So the Capital Market Authority and the Saudi exchange has been working on increasing awareness on different types of investment products and investment vehicles that is available for investors, including ETFs. We have seen a pickup in ETF activity during the past 2 years. We have seen a listing of 3 new ETFs since 2020. When you look at the past, we see that the number of trades did not exceed 5,000 Saudi Riyal. However, in 2020 and 2021, it has reached a figure of around 115,000 trades for full year. Looking at the value traded as well, we have seen also the increase in pickup. The value of trades has reached 2.5 billion in 2020 compared to 2.6 billion in 2021, and it's an encouraging signal. We truly hope that this trend could continue. Moving on to the next slide. We wanted to give you an idea on where to find ETFs in the Saudi exchange, whether you are a retail investor, an institutional investor, a company, a portfolio manager. If you have a mandate to invest only on listed Saudi securities or Saudi funds, or you don't want to go and invest abroad, what you can find in our website, if you go to the markets tab, you will find an ETFs page. If you visit it, you will find all the ETFs that are listed on the Saudi exchange. At the moment, we have 6 ETFs. 2 of them are HSBC MT30 and Yaqeen 30 as well. They are focused on Saudi equities, large and relatively liquid equities in the Saudi market. So they would give you an exposure to some of the largest companies in the kingdom. There is also a Yaqeen petrochemical ETF that is focused on petrochemical companies and will give you an exposure only to the petrochemical sector in the market rather than going and buying all those securities by itself. There is also Al Bilad and Al Sukuk ETFs. Those ETFs invest in Saudi government listed Sukuk securities. They give periodical distribution from the returns from those government Sukuks. There is also Al Bilad Gold ETF, which tracks the price of gold and can give you a direct exposure to gold prices without having to go and invest in gold outside or abroad. This is only an idea on the ETFs that is available in the Saudi exchange. You can go and visit each ETF by itself and find more information about it. Get back to you, Abu Fahd.
Thank you very much. for the insights. So going back to ETFs, basically investor, as rightly said my colleague Mr. Hamid earlier, we do have ETF listed in Saudi market. There are 6 ETFs currently listed in the Saudi market. For investor to know what are the details of an ETF page or ETF information, and what are the main information that investor should focus on. Basically, you can see here on the right side of the screen, on the top in the green 10.8, that's the latest trading price of that security or that ETF. ETF have something called NAV, which is the net asset value per unit, and INAV, which is indicative price unit, net asset value per unit during the trading hours, which is mainly similar to NAV, but it is called an indicative due to the change in the pricing during the market trading. So these information on Tadawul website, the first line, which is the pricing, and the other relative pricing information that's available, which means the previous closing, open, high, sell. These are regular information investor or traders in the market, they know it very well. On the down or on the bottom, you can see the NAV information, again, which is the net asset value per unit and the indicative net asset value for that unit during the trading hours. So usually the NAV get updated by end of day, and the INAV is updated during the market hours, i.e. every 15 seconds. For example, Al Bilad Gold, Al Bilad ETF for gold, you will find more information on Al Bilad or the fund manager, in this case Al Bilad, more information on that ETF. Again, you will find the basket. What is the underlying basket of that ETF on that specific day, on that specific time that you are going to buy that ETF unit in the market. In the middle table here, you can see, or the screenshot, you can see on the down, on the top, on the bottom, the table that shows the gold securities that or commodity that the ETF has bought or owned for that specific unit. So each unit have a partially ownership in one of these or in all of these securities listed in that table. By this, I think we've concluded our presentation. Hamid, pass it to you.
Thank you, Haytham. We are ready to receive your questions. Please leave them at the chat box and we will address them. We have a number of questions at the moment. Fahad, from Shari, it looks like ETFs has more advantages. So why mutual funds still exist?
So very interesting question. Mutual fund offer different strategies and different, let's say, different strategies, if we could call it. Compared to active strategies, usually mutual funds are more popular in terms of active strategies. ETF in terms of active strategies is yet to proven its worthiness, even in the global market. Yet we've seen a growth in that area. But overall, from the slide that we've mentioned earlier, there's still growth and more where ETF take market share from the normal mutual fund. So it is a long journey. I don't think mutual fund will vanish. No, still they serve a specific purpose, and ETF will serve a specific purpose. That is will enrich the market and will enrich the solution that investor can select between.
Another question from Shari. What is AUM?
Yeah, sorry, we did not explain that acronym. AUM, asset under management. So when we say ETF AUM globally, that means asset under management for ETFs.
A question from Khalid bin Atiq from Yaqeen Capital. When an ETF is listed in Saudi and the underlying exposure is to global market, which have different market timings, there will be an arbitrage opportunities available. How will the market maker and the fund manager ensure liquidity and stability of price? If you allow me, Haytham, I would like to take this one. From an exchange perspective, it's an interesting question, and thank you for that, Khalid. So from an exchange perspective, we have looked at other exchanges. We have seen some examples where ETFs that are exposed to US equity, for example, are listed in Europe or Asia Pacific, where they have the same issue of timing. However, what we see is that there are solutions to avoid this issue. It depends on the type of securities that the ETF invests in. It depends on the responsibilities that the market maker is willing to take. But we still believe that it can be mitigated. There are a number of solutions that can be put in place to encounter this issue. And Khalid, we are more than happy to arrange a meeting separately to discuss those solutions with you and the Yaqeen Capital team. Question from Ibrahim, how to open an investment portfolio for GCC citizens and start an investment in ETF. Maybe it's a little bit irrelevant. You could absolutely invest in ETF once you have an active portfolio that is opened at any LP or any broker that provide trading to the Saudi market. Just go directly to your broker, open any portfolio, and make sure that it has direct access to the Saudi market. Any addition to that, Abu Fahad?
No, I would like to thank you, and thanks to the attendees. I hope it was beneficial to them and worth their valuable time.
Thank you so much for being a panelist with us this workshop. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope this workshop has been fruitful and beneficial to all of you. I urge you please to visit the Saudi Capital Market Forum link that is posted in the chat box. It's cmf.tadawulgroup.sa. We have a number of workshops that is taking place today. Please go ahead and register to those workshops. We will also have the physical event of the Saudi Capital Market Forum 2022 taking place tomorrow at the Four Seasons Hotel in Riyadh. So please register and join us. You're more than welcome to come and join us. Thank you again, and hopefully we will see you again in another workshop in the future. Thank you, Haytham.
Thank you very much.